The smell of smoked paprika and stale grief hung heavy in the air of soul and spice. It had been 2 weeks since the funeral, and Kyra still expected to hear the heavy, rhythmic chopping of a cleaver against the butcher block, followed by her father's deep, booming laugh. But the kitchen was silent, save for the hum of the industrial refrigerator and the relentless drumming of the Seattle rain against the alley window. Kyra wiped down the stainless steel counter for the third time that hour, her movements mechanical. Marcus, the man who had raised her, the man who had taught her how to balance the acidity of a tomato sauce with a pinch of brown sugar, was gone. A heart attack, the coroner had said. Quick, painless, but the mess he left behind was anything but. The front door chimes jingled, cutting through the silence. Kyra looked up, wiping her hands on her apron. "We're closed," she called out, her voice raspy from days of little sleep. "The sign says closed." The man who walked in didn't look like a customer looking for gumbo or jambalaya. He looked like a shark gliding into a wadding pool. He was older, Korean, dressed in a suit that cost more than the restaurant's annual insurance premium. He didn't speak immediately. He just surveyed the room with a look of mild distaste, his eyes lingering on the peeling paint and the mismatched chairs. Behind him, 2 younger men in dark raincoats stood guard by the door, their hands clasped in front of them in a way that screamed security detail. "Ms. Kyra Banks?" the older man asked. He placed a briefcase on the table nearest to him, snapping the latches open with a crisp click. "I am Attorney Choi. I represent the estate of the late Chairman Han Seok-jin." Kyra frowned, walking out from behind the counter. "I think you have the wrong place. My father's name was Marcus Banks, and we definitely don't know a Chairman Han." "Marcus Banks was your stepfather," Choi said, his tone devoid of emotion. He pulled a thick stack of documents from the case. "Your biological father was Han Seok-jin, head of the Jumseong Corporation in Seoul. He passed away 3 days ago. This is his last will and testament." Kyra stopped dead in her tracks. The room seemed to tilt. She knew she was adopted, Marcus had never hidden that from her, but her biological parents were a closed chapter, a story of a young couple who couldn't care for her, or so she had been told. "This is a joke, some kind of scam." "It is not. DNA tests were conducted covertly during your last medical checkup, facilitated by Mr. Banks, who was compensated for his silence over the years," Choi continued, ignoring her rising panic. "Chairman Han has left you a significant inheritance, not liquid assets, however. He has bequeathed you 40% of his holdings in the Jumseong Logistics Division." "I don't want it," Kyra snapped, backing away. "I don't know who this man is, and I don't want his money." "It is not just money, Ms. Banks. It is power, and with it liability." Choi looked at his watch. "However, there is a complication. The remaining 60% and the title of chairman was intended for his adopted son and designated heir. The heir is not pleased with this division." Before Kyra could ask what "not pleased" meant, the air in the room changed. It wasn't a sound, but a pressure drop, like the moment before a thunderstorm breaks. The front door opened again, pushing the 2 guards aside as if they were made of paper. A young man stepped out of the rain and into the dim amber light of the restaurant. He was tall, his silhouette sharp and imposing against the wet streetlights outside. He shook a black umbrella, sending a spray of water onto the floorboards, and handed it to one of the guards without looking at him. When he turned to face Kyra, she felt the breath hitch in her throat. He was devastatingly handsome, with high cheekbones and eyes as cold and dark as the Puget Sound at midnight. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin, a silver pin in the shape of a serpent on his lapel. But it was his energy that terrified her. He didn't walk, he prowled. He carried an aura of absolute authority, a quiet violence that made the hairs on Kyra's arms stand up. This was Taemin, the heir. He ignored the lawyer completely, walking straight up to Kyra until he was invading her personal space. He smelled of expensive cologne, rain, and tobacco. He looked down at her, his expression unreadable, scanning her face as if looking for a flaw in a diamond. "So," Taemin said, his voice a low, smooth baritone with a clipped, perfect accent. "This is the secret daughter, the waitress." "Chef," Kyra corrected instinctively, her chin lifting. Fear was thrumming in her veins, but she was Marcus's daughter, and she had thrown drunk linebackers out of this restaurant before. "And who the hell are you?" Taemin's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "I am the man who is going to take that 40% off your hands. Sign the papers and you can keep this." He glanced around the restaurant, his lip curling slightly. "Charming hovel, refuse, and I burn it to the ground with you inside." Kyra stared at him, stunned by the casual brutality of his threat. But then a flash of anger overrode the fear. This was her home. This was Marcus's legacy. "Get out," she hissed. Taemin blinked, genuinely surprised. "Excuse me." "I said get out of my restaurant. I don't know who you people are, I don't know about any chairman, and I certainly don't take orders from a man who threatens women in their own homes." She grabbed the nearest object, a heavy cast-iron skillet from the drying rack, and held it like a weapon. "Leave, now." Taemin looked at the skillet, then back at her eyes. For a second something flickered in his gaze. Amusement, respect. It was gone instantly. "You are foolish," he said coldly. "You think this is a game, you think you inherited stocks, you inherited a target on your back. My father didn't run a logistics company, Ms. Banks. He ran an empire of blood, and by giving you that share, he made you a player in a war you don't understand." "I'm not a player," Kyra said, her grip on the handle tightening until her knuckles turned white. "I'm a chef, and you're trespassing." Taemin stepped closer, ignoring the heavy iron pan inches from his face. "My father was a cruel man. He left you this share to spite me, to cause chaos from the grave. I am trying to save you from the consequences of his pettiness. Sign the transfer, take the payout, disappear." "No," Kyra said, her voice shaking but firm. "I don't sell out to bullies, and if my biological father was a criminal, I'm not keeping his dirty money. But I'm not giving it to you either, so you can continue whatever empire of blood you're talking about. I'll give it to the police. I'll donate it. I'll burn the contracts." Taemin's eyes widened. "You would dissolve the clan. You have no idea what you are saying." Suddenly, the glass window at the front of the restaurant shattered inward. The sound was deafening, a high-pitched crash followed by the distinct thwack-thwack-thwack of bullets tearing into the wood paneling. Taemin moved with a speed that was barely human. Before Kyra could process the sound of the gunshots, he had lunged forward, tackling her around the waist and slamming her to the floor behind the heavy oak counter. Debris rained down on them, shards of glass, splinters of wood, and the dust of decades. Kyra gasped, the air knocked out of her, her face pressed against the rough floorboards. Taemin was on top of her, shielding her body with his own, his heavy coat covering her head. He had a gun in his hand, a sleek, matte black pistol that had appeared out of nowhere. "Stay down," he roared, the cool, aristocratic veneer gone, replaced by the roar of a soldier. Outside, tires screeched, and another volley of bullets chewed up the ceiling, destroying the hanging lights. The restaurant was plunged into darkness, illuminated only by the headlights of the attacking car outside. "Who are they?" Kyra screamed, her hands clutching Taemin's lapels. "The Vipers," Taemin gritted out, checking the magazine of his weapon. "Rivals. They know the chairman is dead. They know about the split inheritance. They aren't here to negotiate, Kyra. They are here to liquidate the shareholders." He looked down at her, their faces inches apart in the dark, dusty crawlspace behind the bar. His eyes were fierce, adrenaline widening his pupils. "You wanted to clear your father's name. You wanted to be principled. Congratulations. You're in the game now." "I didn't ask for this." "Fate rarely asks for permission," Taemin snapped. He grabbed her arm, hauling her up into a crouch. "We have to move, the back exit. Do you have a car?" "My dad's old truck," she stammered. "Too slow. We take mine." He peeked over the counter and fired 2 shots toward the broken window. Suppressing the attackers, "On my count, 1, 2, go." They scrambled toward the kitchen. Kyra's heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She knew every inch of this kitchen, where the floor was slippery, where the corner of the prep table stuck out, but now it felt like a war zone. As they burst through the swinging doors, Kyra instinctively grabbed the one thing that mattered most to her, the thick, leather-bound notebook resting on the pass. Marcus's recipe book. It held everything he knew, everything he was. She shoved it into her apron pocket as Taemin kicked the back door open. The alley was pouring rain. A sleek black sedan was idling there, the engine purring. Taemin shoved her toward the passenger side, opening the door and practically throwing her in before sliding into the driver's seat. "Buckle up," he commanded. As he gunned the engine, the sedan roared to life, tires spinning on the wet asphalt before catching traction. They shot out of the alley just as the attacker's SUV rounded the corner. Taemin drifted the car onto the main road with terrifying precision, weaving through traffic at breakneck speed. Kyra sat trembling in the passenger seat, clutching her apron, the smell of gunpowder and expensive leather filling the car. She looked at the man beside her. His profile was carved from granite, his jaw set tight. He wasn't panicked, he was focused, calculating. "Where are you taking me?" she asked, her voice small. "Somewhere safe," Taemin said, his eyes glued to the rearview mirror. "My safe house. You can't go back there, Kyra, not tonight, maybe not ever." "That was my life," she yelled, the shock turning into anguish. "You brought this to my door." "I brought you the truth," Taemin countered, his voice sharp. "Your father, Marcus. He borrowed money from my clan to open that restaurant 20 years ago. He was a good man, perhaps, but he was compromised. He raised you as part of a deal to clear his debt. You were the collateral." Kyra felt like she had been slapped. "You're lying." "I never lie about business," Taemin said, swerving to avoid a bus, the car sliding sideways before correcting. "And right now, you are the most expensive piece of business I have. The Vipers want us both dead. If you die, your shares go into limbo and the clan weakens, making it easy for them to take over. If I die, the clan falls into chaos. We are stuck together, Chef, whether you like it or not." He glanced at her, seeing the devastation on her face. For a moment, his grip on the steering wheel softened. "I did not come to kill you, Kyra. I came to buy you out. But now I have to keep you alive. Because if I don't, everything my family built and everything your father tried to protect burns to ash." Kyra looked out the window at the blurring city lights. Her restaurant was shot up, her history was a lie, and she was in a car with a Korean mob boss who looked like a devil and drove like a maniac. She touched the outline of the recipe book in her pocket. It was the only thing that felt real. "I'm not signing anything," she whispered, staring into the rain. "Not until I know the whole truth." Taemin shifted gears, the engine growling as they hit the highway. "Then you better get comfortable. It's going to be a long night." The safe house wasn't a house at all. It was a fortress of glass and steel perched atop one of Seattle's most exclusive high-rises. The elevator ride had been silent, a tension-filled ascent that made Kyra's ears pop. When the doors slid open, she stepped into a space that was breathtakingly expensive and utterly devoid of life. The furniture was white leather and chrome, the art on the walls abstract and severe. It felt like a museum or a mausoleum. Taemin threw his keys onto a glass console table, the sound sharp in the quiet room. He shrugged off his ruined suit jacket, wincing slightly. For the first time, Kyra noticed a dark stain spreading on the sleeve of his pristine white dress shirt. "You're bleeding," she said, the instinct to help warring with the urge to run. "A graze, debris likely," Taemin dismissed, walking toward a hidden wet bar. He poured 2 glasses of amber liquid, his hands steady despite the chaos of the last hour. He turned and extended one to her. "Drink. It will stop the shaking." Kyra stared at the glass, then at him. She didn't take it. "I don't want a drink, I want answers. You said Marcus, my father, was compromised. Explain." Taemin set the glass down with a sigh, running a hand through his damp hair. The movement made him look younger, less like a mafia prince and more like a man carrying the weight of the world. Marcus Banks was a brilliant chef but a terrible businessman. He gambled, Kyra, heavy debts. My father, Chairman Han, owned the casinos where Marcus lost his money. But instead of breaking his legs, the chairman saw an opportunity. He saw a man who needed a way out and a child, you, who needed a home. Kyra felt the floor sway beneath her. So what? I was a payment. You were a secret, Taemin corrected. My father had many enemies. Legitimate children are targets, illegitimate ones are liabilities. He gave you to Marcus to hide you. In exchange, he wiped Marcus's debt and funded Soul and Spice. Marcus didn't love you because he had to. He loved you because he chose to. But the foundation of your life was built on Joomseong money. Kyra walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window, looking out at the city below. The rain smeared the lights into long, weeping streaks. He never told me. He was protecting you, just as I am trying to do. Taemin took a sip of his whiskey. But the secret is out. The Vipers didn't just stumble upon us. They were tipped off. Someone inside my organization knew the chairman's will before I did. They knew I was coming to you. So we're trapped, Kyra murmured. If I go to the police, your enemies will kill me to stop me from testifying. If I stay alone, they kill me for the shares. Precisely. Kyra turned around, her eyes scanning the cold, sterile apartment. I need to cook. Taemin blinked, caught off guard. Excuse me. I cook when I'm stressed. It's how I think. Do you have a kitchen in this spaceship, or do you just eat raw ambition? Taemin gestured vaguely toward a hallway, fully equipped, never used. Kyra marched past him. She needed to do something with her hands other than tremble. The kitchen was indeed a chef's dream. Industrial gas range, sub-zero fridge, marble countertops, but it was lifeless. The fridge contained only bottled water, expensive champagne, and a few containers of takeout. She rummaged through the pantry and found a bag of rice, some dried seaweed, sesame oil, and a tin of Spam. It was meager, but it was enough. For 30 minutes, the only sounds were the bubbling of a pot and the rhythmic chopping of the Spam. She made Beauty J Jiggy, army-based stew. It was a dish born of scarcity and war, a hodgepodge of American surplus and Korean spice. It was ugly, hearty, and exactly what Marcus would have made on a rainy Tuesday. As the spicy, savory aroma filled the sterile air of the penthouse, Taemin appeared in the doorway. He had changed into a black turtleneck and slacks, his arm bandaged. He leaned against the doorframe, watching her. The scent seemed to unsettle him, cracking his stoic mask. That smell, he said quietly, it smells like poverty. It smells like survival, Kyra corrected, ladling the red stew into 2 bowls she found. She slid one across the island counter toward him. Eat. You lost blood. You need the salt. Taemin hesitated, then sat on one of the high stools. He took a spoon and tasted the broth. He paused, the spoon hovering near his mouth. For a long moment he didn't move. When he looked up, the coldness in his eyes had thawed, replaced by something confusing. A memory, a regret. My mother used to make this, he admitted, his voice low. Before the chairman took me in, before I became the heir. I haven't eaten this in 20 years. Well, Kyra said, taking a bite of her own, tonight we're not the heir and the heiress. We're just 2 people who almost got shot. They ate in silence, a strange truce forming over the steaming bowls. The food grounded them. It was real, hot, and spicy, cutting through the pretense of the luxury apartment. There is a solution, Taemin said abruptly, pushing his empty bowl away. To the Vipers, to the inheritance, to the traitor in my clan. Kyra braced herself. I'm listening. The clan follows old laws, archaic ones. The chairman left you 40% and me 60%. But the bylaws state that in the event of a succession crisis, if the shareholders are divided, the family line takes precedence. You are blood. I am adopted. There are factions within the Joomseong Corporation that will try to use you to oust me. They will try to manipulate you or kill you. I told you. I don't want the company. They won't believe you, but Taemin leaned forward, his dark eyes locking onto hers. If the two major shareholders are united, legally and familially, the shares are consolidated. The clan cannot be split if the leaders are one entity. Kyra frowned. What are you saying? I am proposing a merger, Taemin said, his voice businesslike, though the tension in his jaw betrayed him. A marriage, temporary, strategic. Kyra choked on her water. You want to marry me? You just met me. You threatened to burn my restaurant down 3 hours ago. It is the only shield strong enough to protect you, Taemin insisted, standing up and packing. If you are my wife, you are part of the main house. To touch you would be an act of war against the entire organization, not just a hit on a stray heir. It gives me the authority to hunt down the Vipers using the full force of the clan without needing a board vote. It buys us time to find the traitor. And what do I get? Kyra asked, standing up to meet him. Besides a husband who carries a gun and a target on my back. You get the truth, Taemin said. You want to know about Marcus. You want to know who your biological father really was. The answers are in the chairman's private archives in Seoul. Access is restricted to family only. As my wife, you have the clearance. As an outsider, you have nothing. Kyra looked at him, searching for the lie, but she found only desperate pragmatism. He wasn't asking for love. He was asking for an alliance. She reached into her pocket and pulled out Marcus's recipe book, her thumb tracing the worn leather. She opened it to a random page, jambalaya, but there in the margins, in Marcus's messy handwriting, was a note she had never understood before. Seoul, 1998. The spice must balance the bitterness. HSJ agreed. HSJ Han Seok-jin, her biological father. Marcus had known him. They had met. This book wasn't just recipes, it was a record. Kyra looked up at Taemin. He was waiting, his posture rigid like a man facing a firing squad. He needed her. The powerful, terrifying mob boss needed the chef from Seattle to save his empire, and she needed him to understand who she really was. Strictly business, Kyra said, her voice steady. We stay married until the Vipers are gone and I get to read those archives. Then we divorce, I cash out my 40% and I rebuild my restaurant. You stay out of my life forever. Taemin extended his hand. It was a deal, not a proposal. Agreed, strictly business. Kyra took his hand. His grip was warm, firm, and calloused. As their skin touched, a spark of electricity, fear, adrenaline, or something else shot up her arm. Pack your things, Taemin said, releasing her hand and checking his watch. The private jet leaves for Seoul in 2 hours. Seattle is no longer safe. Seoul, Kyra exclaimed. I thought we were staying here. The head of the snake is in Korea, Kyra. If we want to kill it, we have to go home. He walked toward the window, looking at the city one last time. And you will need to learn fast. The Vipers are thugs, but the elders in Seoul, they eat people like you for breakfast. You have the shares, but you don't have the respect. If you want to survive my family, you will have to earn it. I survived a kitchen run by Marcus Banks, Kyra said, clutching her notebook. I can handle a few grumpy old men. Taemin turned back, a ghost of a smile touching his lips, the first genuine expression she had seen on him. We shall see, wife, we shall see. Just then Taemin's phone buzzed on the counter. He picked it up, read the message, and his face went ashen. The playful challenge vanished, replaced by the mask of the monster. What is it? Kyra asked, sensing the shift. We need to leave. Now, Taemin said, grabbing his jacket. The pilot just texted, he's dead. The pilot texted that he's dead. No, Taemin said, pulling his gun from the holster and racking the slide. The traitor texted me from the pilot's phone. They know we're heading to the airport. They're waiting. So we can't fly, Kyra said, panic rising again. Not commercially and not privately, Taemin said, his eyes scanning the room for an exit strategy. We have to disappear. We have to go underground. I know a way, but you're not going to like it. I didn't like the marriage proposal either, Kyra retorted, grabbing her bag. Lead the way. Taemin moved to a bookshelf and pulled a specific volume, The Art of War. The bookshelf clicked and swung open, revealing a dark, narrow service elevator. "Welcome to the life, Kyra," he muttered as he ushered her into the darkness. "Try not to die." The service elevator deposited them into the bowels of the building's parking garage, a damp, concrete labyrinth that smelled of gasoline and secrets. Taemin didn't head for a luxury car this time. He led Kyra to a nondescript, rusted delivery van parked in the shadows. "Get in the back," he ordered, his voice tight. "Stay out of sight." Kyra climbed in, sitting on a pile of movers' blankets. The ride was rough, the suspension shot, as Taemin navigated the backstreets of Seattle toward the industrial port. The rain had turned into a deluge, hammering against the metal roof like shrapnel. For the first time since the restaurant, Kyra allowed herself to feel the weight of the situation. She was a chef, a woman who worried about food costs and health inspections. Now she was a fugitive bride-to-be of a mafia prince, smuggling herself out of the country. They abandoned the van at the edge of the shipping yards. Taemin moved with the stealth of a shadow, guiding her through a maze of stacked shipping containers that towered like steel skyscrapers. They stopped at the base of a rusty cargo ship named the Iron Lotus. A man with a scarred face lowered a gangplank, nodding once at Taemin. No words were exchanged. This was the shadow economy, where silence was the currency. "We are crossing the Pacific in a container ship," Kyra asked, looking at the behemoth vessel as they were ushered into a small, utilitarian cabin. "It is the only way to bypass the flight manifests," Taemin said, locking the heavy steel door behind them. He looked exhausted, the adrenaline fatting to reveal deep fatigue. "It will take days, not hours, but we will be alive when we arrive." The journey was a blur of gray waves and confined intimacy. The cabin was tiny, forcing them into a proximity that was both uncomfortable and electric. Taemin spent the first day packing, on the phone with encrypted lines, barking orders in Korean. Kyra spent the time reading Marcus's notebook, looking for clues, for anything that explained why her father, the powerful chairman, had left her this burden. On the second night, the storm outside the ship matched the one inside. Taemin finally put the phone down and sat on the edge of the narrow bunk, rubbing his temples. "You should sleep," Kyra said from the small chair she had claimed. She was peeling an orange she had pilfered from the mess hall, the citrus scent cutting through the stale air of the cabin. "I cannot sleep. If I sleep, the vipers move," Taemin muttered. "If you don't sleep, you'll make a mistake and we'll both die," Kyra countered. She stood up and handed him half the orange. "Eat. Vitamin C stress weakens the immune system." Taemin looked at the orange segment, then up at her. His dark eyes softened. He took it, his fingers brushing hers. "You are relentless, chef." "I'm practical," she said. "Tell me about the elders. If I'm going to be your wife, I need to know who I'm trying to impress." "You are not trying to impress them," Taemin said, his voice dropping an octave. "You are trying to survive them. The Board of Elders, the Council of Seven, they are traditionalists. They believe in blood purity, hierarchy, and silence. They hated that my father adopted me. They will hate you for being unexpected, for being foreign, for being a woman." "They sound lovely," Kyra remarked dryly. "They are sharks, but they respect one thing, strength." Taemin stood up, the motion sudden. He stepped closer to her, invading her space, but this time it wasn't threatening, it was intense. "When we walk into that room in Seoul, you cannot be Kyra the chef. You must be Kyra the heiress. You must look at them and dare them to challenge you. Can you do that?" Kyra held his gaze, her heart pounding against her ribs. "I dealt with health inspectors who tried to shut me down because I wouldn't bribe them. I dealt with suppliers who thought they could overcharge me because I'm a woman. I can handle 7 old men." "Good," Taemin whispered. He was close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from him. The air in the cabin grew thick. For a moment it seemed like he might kiss her, a blur between the role they were playing and the reality they were living. But he pulled back, the mask sliding back into place. "Get some rest. We dock in Incheon tomorrow at sunset. South Korea hit Kyra like a sensory overload. Even smuggled through a private dock and whisked into a waiting armored limousine, she could feel the pulse of the country. The neon lights of Seoul reflected on the Han River, a sprawling futuristic metropolis that hid ancient secrets. They didn't go to a hotel. The car wound its way up into the hills of Bukshan-Hanok village, where the modern glass skyscrapers gave way to traditional tile-roofed houses and high stone walls. They stopped before a massive wooden gate flanked by stone lions. "This is the main house," Taemin said, adjusting his tie. He had changed into a suit kept in the car, looking every inch the emperor returning to his court. He turned to Kyra. She was wearing a sleek black dress he had procured for her, simple but commanding. "Remember, we are united. You are my wife. My honor is your honor." He held out his arm. Kyra took it, her grip firm. "Let's go." The courtyard was lined with men in black suits who bowed deeply as they passed, but Kyra could feel their eyes, sharp, judging. Taemin led her to the main hall, a vast room with polished wooden floors and sliding paper doors. At the far end, sitting on floor cushions behind low lacquer tables, were the 7 elders. The atmosphere was suffocating. The air smelled of incense and judgment. "You return late, Taemin," the central elder said. He was a withered man with eyes like flint. "And you bring a stranger into the inner sanctum." "I bring the majority shareholder," Taemin announced, his voice ringing through the hall. "And I bring my wife." A murmur of shock rippled through the room. The elders exchanged dark glances. "Wife," the elder scoffed. "A frantic lie to secure your position. This woman is a foreigner. She has no place here. The chairman's will was a mistake of a senile mind. We are moving to annul the transfer of shares to her." "You cannot annul blood," Kyra spoke up. Her voice wasn't loud, but it was clear. The elder's eyes snapped to her. "You speak Korean?" he asked in English, mocking her. "No," Kyra replied in English, stepping forward, leaving Taemin's side. "But I speak legacy." She reached into her bag, the guards tensed, hands going to their jackets, and pulled out not a weapon but the leather-bound recipe book. She walked straight to the center of the room and slammed the book onto the low table in front of the head elder. The thud echoed in the silence. "My father, Han Seokjin, didn't just leave me shares," Kyra declared, channeling every ounce of confidence she had feigned in the mirror. "He left me the history of this family. This book contains the favorite meals of every man in this room. He documented them. He cooked for you when you were young soldiers, before you were generals." She opened the book to a marked page. "Elder Kim," she said, looking at the man on the left. "Spicy cod stew, extra radish. You ate it the night you secured the Busan ports in 1995. My father wrote that you wept because it tasted like your mother's cooking." She turned to another page. "Elder Park, galbijajim, sweet, no chestnuts because of your allergy. He made it for you when your son was born." The room fell deadly silent. The elders were staring at the book as if it were a ghost. "You say I am a stranger," Kyra challenged, her voice trembling slightly with emotion but holding strong. "I hold the memory of this clan in my hands. Marcus Banks and Han Seokjin didn't just share a business deal, they shared a brotherhood through food. This alliance isn't new. It's been simmering for 30 years. Taemin and I are just the final course." She stepped back to Taemin's side and took his hand, interlacing their fingers. "We are married. The shares are consolidated. The Joomseong Corporation is whole. Accept it or destroy the very history you claim to protect." Taemin looked at her, and for the first time the look was one of pure, unadulterated awe. She hadn't just played the part, she had rewritten the script. The head elder looked at the book, then at Kyra, and finally at Taemin. The tension stretched until it was agonizing. Finally, the old man let out a long, raspy sigh. "The chairman was a sentimental fool," the elder grumbled. "He poured tea into a cup, but he picked his ingredients well." He raised the cup slightly toward Taemin. "We recognize the union for now." Taemin let out a breath he seemed to have been holding for days. "Thank you, elders." But the elder added, his eyes narrowing, "The internal threat remains. The Vipers knew your location in Seattle. They knew the pilot. If we accept this marriage, you must purge the rot from within. Tonight." "We will," Taemin promised. They were dismissed. As they walked out of the main hall and into the cool night air of the courtyard, Taemin pulled Kyra into the shadows of a plum blossom tree. "You were incredible," he breathed, his composure cracking. "I have never seen them silenced like that." "I told you," Kyra said, her knees finally shaking now that the adrenaline was fading. "Food is power." Taemin looked down at her, the moonlight catching the sharp angles of his face. The danger wasn't over. The traitor was still out there, close, perhaps within these very walls. But in this moment the connection between them shifted. It wasn't just survival anymore. "Kyra," he said softly. He reached out, his hand cupping her cheek, his thumb brushing her skin. She didn't pull away. She leaned into his touch. "We have to find the traitor, Taemin." "I know," he whispered, leaning in, his lips inches from hers. "But first—" The sound of a single, slow clap interrupted them. They spun around. Emerging from the darkness of the veranda was a man. He was younger than the elders, handsome, with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was Choi, the lawyer from Seattle, the man who had delivered the news of the inheritance. "Bravo," Choi said, walking into the moonlight. "A touching performance, truly, the recipe book, a stroke of genius. I didn't think the chef had it in her." "Choi," Taemin stepped in front of Kyra, his body tensing. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to handle the estate," Choi smiled, pulling a cigarette from his pocket, "and to collect my bonus from the Vipers." Taemin's eyes widened. "It was you're the leak." "I am the executor of the will," Choi corrected, lighting the cigarette. "And the will is so much easier to execute when the beneficiaries are deceased." Behind Choi, 3 shadows detached themselves from the walls, assassins, dressed in the livery of the Jumseong household guards. The call was coming from inside the house. "Run," Taemin commanded Kyra, his voice low and deadly. "Not without you," she said. "Kyra, go to the kitchen," Taemin roared as he drew his gun. "This is my house. I will end this." As the first shot rang out, shattering the peaceful silence of the Hanok village, Kyra scrambled toward the only place she knew she could use as a weapon, the industrial kitchen of the main estate, while Taemin threw himself into the line of fire to buy her time. Kyra burst into the estate kitchen, the heavy wooden doors slamming shut behind her. The room was cavernous, smelling of fermented soy and old stone. It was a place of creation, but tonight she had to turn it into a fortress. Her heart hammered against her ribs like a frantic bird. Outside, the pop-pop-pop of gunfire echoed through the courtyard, each shot a reminder that Taemin was fighting alone against impossible odds. She scanned the room desperately. Knives, too close range, pans, good shields but not enough. Her eyes landed on a massive vat of oil sitting on the industrial burner, kept warm for late-night frying. The door behind her creaked open. Kyra didn't turn around. She knew who it was. The heavy, deliberate footsteps didn't belong to a chef. One of Choi's assassins had followed her. "Nowhere to run, little heiress," a gravelly voice sneered from the shadows. "Make it easy. The lawyer pays double for a clean job." Kyra gripped the handle of a metal ladle, her knuckles white. She took a deep breath, channeling the calm that Marcus had taught her. In the kitchen, panic is the enemy. Focus on the heat. "I'm not running," Kyra said, her voice trembling but loud. She moved her hand toward the gas valve of the burner. "And I'm not an heiress. I'm a line cook." She twisted the valve to maximum. The flames roared up beneath the vat. The assassin stepped into the light, a suppressed pistol in his hand. He raised it lazily. "Goodbye, Ms. Banks." Kyra didn't wait. She grabbed a bowl of water from the prep table, and with a scream that was half terror and half rage, threw it directly into the superheated oil vat. Reaction. The water hit the oil and exploded instantly into a pillar of scalding steam and aerosolized grease. The assassin roared in pain as the hot cloud engulfed him, blinding him and searing his skin. He fired blindly, the bullet pinging harmlessly off a hanging copper pot. Kyra didn't hesitate. While he clawed at his eyes, she swung a heavy cast-iron griddle with both hands, channeling all the fear and anger of the last week into the swing. It connected with the side of his head with a sickening thud. The man crumbled to the floor and didn't move. Kyra stood over him, panting, the kitchen filled with the hiss of steam. She was shaking, but she was alive. She looked at the door. Taemin. She grabbed the assassin's discarded gun. She had never fired one, but she knew which end the danger came out of. She kicked the kitchen doors open and ran back into the night. The courtyard was a mess of shattered tiles and moonlight. Two of the loyal guards were down. Taemin was crouched behind a stone pillar, clutching his side, blood seeping through his fingers. Choi stood in the center of the yard, safe behind his remaining two men, looking bored. "Finish him," Choi ordered, checking his watch. "I have a flight to catch." One of the gunmen moved to flank Taemin. "Hey!" Kyra screamed. The sudden shout drew every eye. Kyra stood on the steps of the kitchen, looking like a vengeance spirit, her dress torn, her hair wild, holding the gun with a two-handed grip that was shaky but determined. "Kyra, get back!" Taemin yelled, his voice ragged with pain. Choi laughed, a cold, dry sound. "Look at that. The wife tries to play hero. Do you think you can hit us from there, Cook? You're shaking." "I don't have to hit you," Kyra said, her eyes locking with Taemin across the yard. She saw him calculate, saw the realization dawn in his eyes. "I just have to balance the bitterness." She aimed not at Choi but at the decorative paper lanterns hanging above the gunmen, lanterns filled with oil. She squeezed the trigger. The first shot went wide. The second shattered the clay vessel. Oil rained down onto the wooden deck where Choi's men stood. In the same second, Taemin broke from cover. He didn't shoot the men, he shot the sparks. He fired at the stone lantern at their feet, the bullet striking a spark against the flint. Whoosh! The oil caught fire instantly, creating a wall of flame between Choi and his bodyguards. The men scrambled back, panicked by the sudden inferno. In the chaos, Taemin moved like a phantom. He vaulted through the smoke, tackling Choi to the ground. The lawyer shrieked, his composure shattering as Taemin pinned him to the gravel, the barrel of his gun pressed against Choi's forehead. "The will," Taemin snarled, his face a mask of cold fury. "Cancel the hit. Call the Vipers off." "It's too late," Choi spat, blood on his teeth. "They're coming. You can't stop the change, Taemin. You're a relic." "I am the chairman," Taemin said, his voice deadly calm. "And you are fired." He didn't kill him. Instead, the heavy wooden gates of the estate burst open. But it wasn't the Vipers. It was a fleet of black sedans led by the head elder himself, flanked by dozens of clan enforcers. The cavalry had arrived. The elder stepped out, looking at the burning courtyard, the dead assassin and Taemin holding the traitor at gunpoint. He looked at Kyra, who was still holding the gun, tears streaming down her soot-stained face. The elder nodded once, a slow, respectful bow. Taemin pistol-whipped Choi into unconsciousness and stood up. He swayed, his legs giving out. Kyra dropped her gun and ran to him, catching him before he hit the ground. "I got you," she sobbed, pressing her hands against his wound. "I got you." Taemin looked up at her, his vision blurring. He reached up, touching her face with a bloody hand. You blew up my kitchen." Kyra let out a wet, choked laugh. "I'll clean it up." "Deal," Taemin whispered, before the darkness took him. 6 months later. The smell of Seattle rain was gone, replaced by the crisp, dry air of a Seoul autumn. The leaves on Namsan Mountain were turning a brilliant crimson. "The trick," Kyra said, adjusting the heat on the induction stove, "is to let the kimchi saute until it turns translucent. That releases the sweetness." A group of 4 young line cooks nodded furiously, taking notes. This wasn't a dark, dusty kitchen anymore. It was the gleaming, open-concept kitchen of the Golden Spoon, the hottest new restaurant in the Gangnam district. Kyra wiped her hands on her apron. She looked different, confident. Her movements were sharp, authoritative. She wasn't just Marcus Banks's daughter anymore. She was a force of her own. The bell above the entrance chimed. The lunch rush was over, the restaurant empty save for the staff. A man walked in. He wore a navy blue suit, tailored to perfection, no tie. He didn't have guards with him. He didn't need them anymore. The limp was almost gone, just a faint hitch in his step that gave him character. Taemin walked to the counter, leaning against it with a casual grace that still made Kyra's stomach do a flip. "I hear the owner is a tyrant," Taemin teased, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "Only when people are late for lunch," Kyra retorted, untying her apron. "How was the board meeting?" "Boring," Taemin sighed. "We finalized the merger with the logistics firm. Legit business is exhausting, Kyra. So much paperwork, I almost missed the shootouts." "Liar," she smiled. "You caught me." He reached across the counter, taking her hand. He twisted the simple gold band on her finger. "The elders asked about you. They want to know when the matriarch will bless them with a dinner again." "Tell them I'm busy running a business," Kyra said, coming out from behind the counter. "They can make a reservation like everyone else." They walked to a table by the window overlooking the bustling street. Life had settled into a rhythm. Taemin had kept his promise. He had purged the clan of the violent elements, turning the Joomseong Corporation into a legitimate empire. It was hard, dangerous work, but he had done it for her, for himself. Kyra had gotten her truth. She had read the archives. Her father, the old chairman, had loved her mother desperately, but the clan laws had forbidden their marriage. Sending Kyra away was the only act of love he could afford, and leaving her the shares wasn't an act of spite. It was an act of hope. He knew Taemin needed a partner, someone outside the cycle of violence to break the wheel. "I brought you something," Taemin said, sliding a small, wrapped box across the table. Kyra opened it. Inside was a first-edition copy of a French cookbook she had mentioned months ago, impossible to find. "You listen," she said softly. "I learn," he corrected. "I have a good teacher." He looked at her, the intensity in his eyes undimmed by domesticity. "The contract," he started, his voice serious. "The 6 months are up. Technically, the Vipers are gone. The company is stable. You can cash out, go back to Seattle." Kyra looked at the book, then at the restaurant she had built, and finally at the man who had burned down half the underworld to keep her safe. She reached into her bag and pulled out a folded piece of paper, the annulment papers he had drawn up for her safety weeks ago. She placed the paper on the table. Then she took a lighter from her pocket, the same one she used to light the stoves every morning. "What are you doing?" Taemin asked, his breath hitching. "I'm cooking," Kyra whispered. She lit the corner of the document. They watched in silence as the legal separation turned to ash and smoke, curling up toward the ceiling. "I don't do temporary, Taemin," she said, leaning across the table to take his face in her hands. "And I don't run from a challenge. My father left me a legacy. He left me a family. I'm keeping both." Taemin let out a shuddering breath, a smile breaking across his face, radiant, free, and full of love. He leaned in and kissed her, a slow, deep kiss that tasted of promise. "Then I guess you are stuck with me, chef," he murmured against her lips. "Shut up and eat," Kyra replied, smiling. On the table between them lay Marcus's battered leather notebook. It was closed now. The recipes were no longer secrets to be deciphered, but memories to be cherished. The war was over. Dinner was served.